I was born in New York City to two parents who had grown up in Jewish families. And just before I was born, they had both become believers in Jesus. And so they were in their 30s, they've come out of a Jewish upbringing, and now they're trying to figure out a new way to live. And I feel like I grew up getting to watch them on this journey of trying to figure out, what does this look like to be Jewish and believe in Jesus? My mom's family included people who were ultra-Orthodox religious Jews. My dad's family was more secular. And my parents both had experienced a lot of trauma in their lives. My mom was a professional dancer in New York, and she'd experienced a lot of really hard things. And my dad actually was homeless. And so when they came to faith in Jesus, they were so excited, but they were also so broken. And it was only the beginning of them healing and getting to know this new faith that they had. So I grew up seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of your parents are saying they have a certain faith, but they still have behaviors from their past life before their faith. And how do you fit together all of your relatives being Jewish, and then you're trying to go to a church and your family very obviously doesn't fit in? And I grew up just trying to make sense of all of that. The first few years that I was growing up, my parents were new believers and they were really thriving in this new faith and excited about it. New believers in Jesus, and they had this vision to raise their kids in the Jewish cultural way that they were raised, but just adding Jesus as Messiah into it. But then when I was around 5 years old, things started to really go downhill. My dad entered a relapse of his drug addiction. He'd been a heroin addict on and off of the streets of Manhattan, like I said, for many, many years. Starting with getting back into drinking, then getting back into pills, and eventually heavier and heavier things. He struggled on and off with addiction really for the rest of my childhood, for the next maybe 10, 15 years. So even though we got this great start, I felt like it all started to very quickly fall apart. And as a kid, it was very obvious to me that my parents had ideals about the type of people they wanted to be, but they were not in a place yet where they were ready and able and equipped to live up to those ideals. And now looking back, I understand that they had so much unresolved pain and unresolved trauma. But as a kid, you don't really see the big picture. You're just living your life and you know that things are really off. The other thing about my parents is because they had these ideals of faith, they wanted to do things like homeschool their children. They wanted to be studying the Bible all the time, which are good intentions. But then if you mix those things with the fact that my dad was using drugs, he didn't have an income, neither of them was working for most of my childhood. They had 4 kids in just 5-6 years. They had 4 kids, and both of them were really unequipped to run a large family because of all of their own issues. When you mix their ideals of, homeschooling with the reality of what they were actually able to do, my experience was more just like that I didn't go to school for most of my childhood. I didn't go to school until I was 10 years old. I did learn to read, and my parents did teach me some basic things, but my main childhood experience was being at home with my dad being on drugs and taking care of my younger siblings. And I didn't really feel like I was socialized. I didn't even fully understand at that young age that it was because of my dad's addiction. And then also my mom, even though she wasn't actively using drugs, she had a lot of past issues with addiction, and she'd been a dancer and struggled with eating disorders, and she had experienced a lot of abuse in her life. And so her relationship with my dad, their relationship together, they were almost like teenagers in love. Like they loved each other and they had such good intentions, but their development, because of all the trauma that they'd experienced, their development was like a 14-year-old. So think about, a 13 or 14-year-old with the greatest of intentions, but their life skills were so behind. So I found myself as the oldest child in this big family with parents who are really struggling just to make ends meet, just to get through the day, just to keep their relationship afloat. There was a lot of mixed messages. Like I remember my dad teaching a Bible study while he was very, obviously very high. But I still saw that he genuinely did love the Bible and he did love God, but at the same time, his actions weren't matching his heart. As I was growing up, a lot of things unfolded that were really traumatic also for me. There were a couple of years for my family that were especially really, really difficult at the height of my father's drug addiction. And I was the oldest child. I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And my mom was homeschooling us. So we're home, we're home all day. We don't know any other kids. We live in a small apartment in Brooklyn. And because this is before smartphones and Instacart and Amazon, if she needed to get anything done, if she just needed to go to the grocery store, get diapers or do whatever, she would have to go out, and we didn't go to school. So we were at home. And so I had a lot of experiences of being with my father while he was using drugs, unsupervised by any other adult. And again, because I didn't go to school, a lot of things I would end up doing in the day was like palling around with my dad. And he would take me to the methadone clinic, and I would hang around with him and other buddies of his, or he would take me to sell newspapers. There's an intersection in Brooklyn that's pretty well known, the intersection of Church and Ocean Parkway. And I used to go out there every day and sell newspapers on the street at the intersection when I was 8 years old and make cash for my dad to use to go buy drugs. And at the time, what's crazy is I actually felt special. Like I felt like, oh, my dad wants me to do something special with him. He trusts me, he needs me. Because as a kid, you crave love and affection and attention. And I didn't really understand that other children were going to school in these times where I was doing things like selling newspapers on the street. There was a lot of times where, my dad would overdose, and then I would be, calling 911. I was on my own with him. I would find him passed out. So then that built up into a lot of fear where if my mom wasn't home, sometimes she would go out at night to do different things. And I would just stay up. I would stay up all night because I truly was aware that if I went to sleep, he might overdose on drugs, and I had to be awake to call 911 if something happened. And sometimes I would try to flush pills down the toilet or try to get involved to be helpful in my own, way as a child. And sometimes I was even home on my own with all of my siblings. Sometimes my dad would just disappear, even like we wouldn't hear from him for days. And then we would get a call that he was in a ER somewhere. And so my mom would go to the hospital and leave us home, and she couldn't hire a babysitter because no one would babysit us, because any babysitter that ever came would say, oh, my parents will never allow me to come to your house again. So
how old were you at this point, and how old were your siblings?
so I was 8 years old around this time, and my siblings were 6, 4, and 2-ish. I'm probably I'm talking about over a range of time. So around those ages. So sometimes I would be home with them alone for long amounts of time and like making them dinner, putting them to bed, taking care of them. And again, remember, we had no school. We didn't go to school. But I really feel like God sent me to school. Like, I learned so many amazing life skills in those years. Even though I wasn't getting a formal education, I would always create games and plays and stories, and I would write books, and I would always try to think of things to do to just keep my siblings busy. Because again, we're home all day with nothing to do in a small apartment in Brooklyn. We have neither of our parents work. We're on food stamps. What we would do for fun is make crafts and sell them on the subway, things like that. And I was always creating, games, and like I would write a play and then we would put on a play, or I would create a circus. And so God really taught me amazing skills that I would use later in life. And I feel like that's been a theme all throughout my life, that God would send me to the school of the place he wanted me, where he wanted me to learn, even if it wasn't traditional. Over that time, in those years, things slowly really just got worse and worse. And I could just share a lot of memories, but I'll just share a few, core memories. Just that I would have a lot of times with my dad where he was on drugs and, he wasn't in control of himself physically. So that could lead to a lot of different things, like, inappropriate behaviors. It can lead to somebody, having no control of their bodily functions. And at times I was in a position like his caregiver at a very young age. And so it was getting worse and worse. And I started to feel more and more unsafe, and even physically unsafe, because I could see more and more that my dad had really no sense of boundaries, just as his drug use got worse. And he would talk to me and have conversations with me or have interactions with me where it was clear to me he didn't know who I was, if that makes sense. Like, he would call me other names, or he would have conversations with me that were very obviously inappropriate conversations to have with a child. And so I did start to gain some awareness that it was becoming more and more unsafe. And I felt like I had to be very guarded. I started to lose a lot of trust of adults, of men. I started to really feel like I have to protect myself. I have to be really on it, because I would be in situations with him where I would have to talk him down from something. One time he took like my younger brother, who was 4 years old, and just took him away in the middle of the night. And again, it's like, this is before cell phones. So things like that would happen. And I started to feel very concerned, and like I had to be on guard, and I had to, again, like maybe talk him down from something that he thought he was going to do that I knew was inappropriate. And then I would have to have conversations with my mom, like, hey, this is really getting to be unsafe. Like, we need to make a change. This isn't a situation that children really can be in. And so I really felt like my childhood ended, if that makes sense, because I felt like I had to really guard myself and position myself in the family like a parent, a third parent, or even a co-parent with them. And at a certain point, I reached a breaking point, and I actually ran away from home, and I wouldn't come back. And my mom at some point, I think, understood that I would not come back, that I was truly like, I'm not, it's not safe anymore for me to be in this home. And so I did actually leave and stay with another family for a number of months. And then I came back only when my mom agreed that she was gonna separate from my dad. It was very difficult. They did not want to separate, but it was the last resort. Like, he had to go to rehab and she had to leave. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, to watch that unfold, it really broke my heart, but it was the right thing. And so my mom knew she couldn't afford to be in the city on her own with 4 kids without a job. So she just packed us up. We moved to upstate where she knew somebody who got us a house, like that type of thing. We didn't know a soul, right? And we just drove away. And my dad went to rehab. And then I started to go to school for the first time after that, and started to, I feel like, come into a new season that I was very happy about. My dad was in rehab, and I went to visit him one time in rehab, and I swore to never go again because it was one of the darkest places that I ever have been in my life. Just the oppressive, toxic darkness of that place. It was like a check-in rehab facility for men in New York City on hard drugs. I actually never again in my life really felt safe, physically safe, around my father. Believe it or not, like a year later, my dad left the rehab. He didn't finish it. He left the rehab because he missed my mom too much. And I felt growing up like, again, like they were sort of like these 14-year-olds in love. You know what I mean? So they loved each other so much. They couldn't be apart, which sounds very sweet, but they also didn't have a great awareness of like, is this a good environment for children? You know? So my dad left rehab and he showed back up at our door with no warning and just moved back in. And that was very difficult for me, but I accepted that it was what my mom wanted and that she didn't want to be alone. Now, as a wife and a mother, I can relate to her a lot more. But at that time, I was very angry. I was very angry. I felt that it was the wrong decision. My dad, he never fully went back to as extreme of drug abuse that he'd been in my younger years. But the rest of my childhood and my teen years, he was on and off. Sometimes he would have a good year, and then he'd have a bad year. He would go to rehab, he would come back. So it just continued on like that for years and years, very unstable. I was very angry and had really lost a lot of my trust in people, trust in men. And I felt like it's all on me. No one's going to take care of me. No one's going to look out for me. I have to figure out whatever my future is, whatever my life is, whatever I'm going to believe about faith. You know, I saw everything from, my cousins who are Orthodox Jews to my cousins who are secular Jews. The family that I stayed with when I wasn't living with my family, they were also religious Jews, and I went to school with their children. Actually, that was my first experience going to school. I was going to a religious Jewish day school. And so I really felt Jewish culturally. I resonated with that. And I knew about Jesus because I'd heard about it from my parents. And I'd had one spiritual experience in my life where one of those nights where I was alone with my father and he was using drugs. And again, I felt that I needed to stay up all night to make sure that nothing happened to one of my siblings or that he didn't hurt himself. And I remember I had heard a song that was the verse Psalm 22:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. I'd heard just a children's song to that verse, and I was just singing it over and over and over, like throughout the night, staying up all night. I remember it very clearly in our living room in this apartment in Brooklyn. And it felt very real to me. I had seen people overdosed on drugs. I had seen things that God is with you. You're not alone. That verse for me was like, this like hope I was holding on to, like a life raft or something. And I just kept singing it over and over. And I felt I've only a few times in my life felt like a supernatural type of experience or presence, but that night I felt like Jesus was in the room with me. I felt not alone. I felt like there was a heavy presence in the room, and that God saw me in this situation and that he did not forget me. And that even though I felt so unseen, again, remember, like, I didn't go to school. I didn't have any other teachers. I didn't have any other friends. If we were going to school, maybe there would have been a teacher that would have called Child Protective Services or something like that. But I really knew in that moment that God saw me. And that stayed with me the rest of my life. So years go by, I'm a teenager. I felt like I'd had a real experience and encounter with Jesus, and I believed that he was real. But I also believed that maybe the Christian lifestyle or a religious lifestyle was not realistic, because I'd observed my parents, that they'd idealized that they wanted to be these people of faith, and they weren't really equipped to live it. And so I didn't want to be that. I felt like that was hypocritical, right? Like, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, then you should live a certain way and not just call yourself something and maybe it's not true under the surface, right? So I felt kind of like, yeah, maybe Jesus is real, maybe God's real. That wasn't me. I wasn't like somebody who wondered about the scientific proof and how was creation made, and like all the apologetics and all the history. Some people really, that speaks deeply to them. I wasn't so worried about that. I just felt like whatever you're going to call yourself, just at least be the real deal. And I felt like I didn't have the character to be the real deal. So even if I thought God is real, I love Jesus, I knew that I also had an anger, a very deep anger that felt very core to who I was. And I really struggled with this craving for male attention. And I think for this like love that I felt that I never got, especially from my father, or that maybe I did get, but it was in an unhealthy way. And so I've always had different boyfriends. Like my teenage years, I always had a boyfriend. And I also had another boyfriend that I was cheating on the boyfriend with. And I was always playing. Like I was like, and it was intentional. It wasn't like I wanted to hurt people. Like I would cheat on somebody with the intention of like, oh, I'm a man eater. Like they deserved it. Men treat women like crap. This is what they deserve. Like it was like this anger, craving for love and anger mixed together. And that's what that produced in me, was like, well, they shouldn't be so naive. Like they deserve to be hurt, And I hurt a lot of people. And I felt like no matter how many different guys I dated, no matter how many different relationships I was in, it never was healing. And so I just felt like, well, you know what? Like, this is just who I am. I'm not really cut out to be a person of faith, because I'm not really going to live that life. Like, that's not me. I'm not going to be playing the piano, wearing a long skirt, like cooking cornbread. You know what I mean? Like I had this image in my mind of like who I would have to grow up to be, and that wasn't me. And another thing is, because I was not really socialized as a child, you could say, right? Like how I really didn't go to school for my early childhood, I missed a lot of things developmentally. Which, like I said, I know now, looking back, that God provided exactly what I needed to become who he created me to be. But I also struggled with feeling like I wasn't really socialized as a girl. I noticed that a lot of the other girls that I went to school with had grown up around other girls and girlfriends and, cultural experiences. as females that I never had had. And so I really struggled with my identity, and not so much in a way of like, should I start dressing like a boy or anything like that? But I really struggled with like, why am I not like the other girls? And I would date guys and then they would tell me like, you're not sweet like other girls. Like, you're masculine, or you're so like, why are you so intense? Like, girls are not supposed to be like that. And I would get, I felt like I would get, even from other girls, they would say things to me like, you're not like us. And so that also was something that I felt that was very deeply painful to me. Like, why am I not sweet and innocent like these other girls? I just hadn't had that sweet girl childhood that they'd had. I'd missed it completely. And so I didn't know how to act feminine and the way that they acted. So years go by. I needed to go to college. I honestly didn't really have like this grand vision of what I would do. I just knew I wanted to live in the city back in New York because a lot of my friends were going to college in New York City, and I just always loved the city and loved the energy. And I decided to study theater, which is still actually, I look back and I'm like, that's so interesting that I did that, because I wasn't your stereotypical theater person. I wasn't like in all these shows and, dancing and singing and performing. I'd actually done almost none of that. But because of my experience growing up, I was always putting on plays and writing stories and writing a script. And there was something about me that just was so drawn to the art of teamwork. And that's how I saw theater. Like, it's the art of teamwork. It's like you're bringing a team together to tell a story. And I'd really found a lot of comfort throughout my life in literature and in plays and in reading. And I loved I loved teamwork as an idea, especially as that older sister in a big family, of like, how do you bring people together in a way to create something that's really special, a memory or an experience. So I came to the city, I started to study theater, and for the first time in my life, I had all these people around me telling me that I was so talented and so gifted and so smart. And I'd never really heard things like that growing up. I think for my parents, it wasn't a big focus, as you might imagine, with everything they were going through. And I started to think like, oh, maybe I can really make something of myself. I also started at the age of 16, I started waitressing because, again, I had this pressure that it's all on me. No one's going to take care of you. Nobody is going to be looking out for you. You've got to figure it out on your own. So when I was in high school, I actually saved up a lot of the finances I needed to go to college and live in the city, because I was like hustling. I was working double shifts. I was like, I was clocking in as a waitress as myself, clocking out as a minor, and then I had another card where I would clock in as a non-minor and do another shift, which was illegal, But I was like, I wanted to just work and work and work. And so then I was in the city, and I also was waitressing and bartending, and I worked at a lot of different places, selling shots, and started to also get sucked in to a lifestyle of, of drinking, of partying, of things like that. And I think that it was all like this toxic soup of like, I was angry, I wanted to hurt men, I craved attention and love and security. I felt like I had to do everything on my own. And so I was in school, dating lots of guys, and in so much pain. What's really funny, though, is that God kept putting people around me who were people of faith. I had a lot of friends from growing up who were other Jewish believers in Jesus, because my parents had still been involved in some of that community, and they'd sent me to Jews for Jesus summer camp where I'd made a lot of friends and had a lot of good memories. So some of my best friends were still in that community, and I would still hang out with them, and I would go to different events with them. And when I was with them, I felt like I was part of that community. But again, in the back of my mind was, I will never be the person who will live up to what this faith expects of you. And so I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna live a lie. I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna be this great person of faith when I know it's not real, it's not true. So I have all these friends who are all across the spectrum. From, some of them are Jewish followers of Jesus. Some of them are, totally secular. Some of them are people I'm working in restaurants with. And I had so many bad experiences in restaurants with men that just added on. It just piled on to my distrust and my hate. I had just so many experiences with just people that were in that world, drug dealers, older men who would take advantage of younger women. And so I just felt like I just became more and more guarded and angry. And I had dated a couple guys in college that were not people of faith, really, or not religious. And then after they started dating me, started to get more serious about their faith and started to be like, oh, I want to serve God, and that actually for me was a negative. I was like, okay, time to break up now because I didn't want to go that direction. Along that journey, one of those people that I dated was David, who's my husband now. But at the time, he was one of many guys that I was talking to. And he also wasn't very serious about his faith. He'd been working also in the restaurant industry, like a similar lifestyle to me, and we really connected. But then we started dating, and like it had happened several times in a row, as soon as he started dating me, all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I need to get more serious about my faith. I'm realizing God's calling me to serve him. I need to make changes in my life. And I was like, man, another one. Another one bites the dust. So I broke up with him, and that for me was a point where I really spiraled into a very dark chapter of my life where I just was done. I was just like, I was in so much emotional pain, and I kept trying to fill that pain. And I was getting involved deeper and deeper into the avant-garde theater world in New York. I'd graduated college, and the more I tried to fill that pain, the worse it got. And at some point, I moved in to a big warehouse in Brooklyn that was like an artist commune. There was like maybe a dozen different artists who were living there. And then they had this like huge gallery and event space, and they would put on shows there, and bands would come play, and they would throw raves. And I had started a theater company, so I was like, this is incredible. I'm going to move in, and my theater company can rehearse here, and we'll perform here. And finally, I'm going to be free. Like, I need to get away from all that faith stuff so I can be my true self, so I can stop putting this pressure on myself to hold back and just follow my intuition, follow my passion, and find happiness. So I move into this artist loft, and the first few months were pretty cool. And a lot of people, would come there for parties. They'd have these huge parties. And my friends would come and be like, this is awesome. Like, you live here, like bands are coming. Some of these artists that were coming in and out were, people that had some notoriety, or they had their work in well-known places. And I was starting to connect with people in the theater world even who went on to, have work that was quite well known. And there was a guy who lived with us who was a sculptor who had a lot of his work in like well-known buildings in New York. And it just was, on the surface, it was so cool. And people would come and have these crazy parties. But what I learned very quickly was that then everybody leaves and you're still there in the morning when the party's over. And somebody woke up and they were raped. And somebody else just woke up and they were robbed. And somebody over here woke up and they had a dog that pooped on their face and we don't know whose dog this is. And I started to realize very quickly, it's a lie. It looks so fun at midnight, but at 8 a.m, it's hell. It's everybody's version of hell when they wake up in the morning. Somebody's overdosed. Somebody just lost their partner to an overdose. Like, this is hell on earth. Why do we think this is fun? And I started to realize that the artists that were living there, even though some of them in the world's eyes, in people's eyes might be like they were successful, they were living the dream. This was my dream, to be a starving artist, to just like be my true self and express myself with other artists. And I noticed that the more and more successful people got, the more empty they seemed. And it seemed like they had this pain like I had, and they were trying to fill it with creativity, with their art, with their relationships, with partying. And it's a black hole. You can't fill it.
Did you have language for this at the time? Or it was almost like you were still processing it as you were witnessing it?
I had language for it at the time because throughout my childhood, I'd been very exposed to the Bible. But a lot of it I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me. I would hear these things that just sounded like cliches to me, or they just sounded like, something that might go in a fortune cookie or something. But in that time of my life, I felt like God opened my eyes to things in the Bible that I'd read about that I was now seeing play out in reality, and it made sense to me. Like these ideas that I'd heard about, sin feels good or makes you happy for the time, but in the end, it leads to death. Again, like I thought that was just like a slogan, you know what I mean? Like death, like symbolically. And then it was like God opened my eyes, like, no, people are dying.
Wow.
They're like, people are emotionally killing themselves. They're, even if they're not literally dying, they're dying inside. And also at the same time, David, who I dated and then I broke up with, he didn't give up on me. He kept reaching out to me. He would just show up at this artist loft and be like, hey, I'm here, we're going to church. And he would say things to me very straight, like, you're angry with God. That's what all this is really about. And no one had said things to me like that before. No one had called me out in that way. So through this process of God opening my eyes to the things that were happening around me, and also through the influence of David, and also through the influence of many people throughout my life, throughout my entire life, so many different people who'd invested in me, who'd shared with me. There were a lot of people in the faith community, again, that I knew, through growing up or through my parents, that had invested so much, so many seeds of faith that all started to come together at that time.
How old were you?
I was 21, 22. And I had also gone very deep and dark into, like, I was working in that bar scene, and I just got deeper and deeper into that world, working at darker and darker types of places, being involved in things where I started to get this mentality like, I'm just sharing this because someone out there will relate to this, right? Like, when you've been so hurt, then the story you start telling yourself is like, I didn't have any advantages in life. What kind of advantage can I have? At least I can use my looks. I can use my body. I can manipulate men. I got to use what I've got. I didn't grow up with anything. You know what I mean? Like, you start to tell yourself like, well, these are the cards I was dealt. And I'd had so many bad experiences with men in the restaurant world and bartending and then being a shot girl. And then you start to go down a path in your mind of like, I'm already making money for my sexuality. What's one more step down that road? You know what I mean? And I also got into a really dark spiral of stealing. That was another thing. And it was all rooted in that anger. And it was around this time where I think a lot of people of my generation can relate to that anger. And I know young people today, coming of age today, are experiencing it in their own time, right? But it was like, man, we're coming of age and it was like Columbine, 9/11, wars, and then the economy crashed. And it just felt like, man, we got screwed by Wall Street. And I would just steal stuff just to be like, yeah, well, why shouldn't I steal this? The money's just going to go to the pocket of some evil executive who's using this money to take advantage of and oppress other people. So why am I going to pay money for their product, right? And so I felt like just everything in my life was just like fueled by this just anger. And at a certain point, I just had to have a conversation with God. Like, okay, I can't do the life that you ask people to do. So either I'm not going to do it and I'm just going to embrace the dark side, or you have to take over and live my life for me because I can't do that life. And that was the most powerful prayer I've ever said. Do my life for me. Just take over. And I had this experience the next few months after I prayed that prayer where it felt like God was just ripping the anger off of me. Like it was like scales, like it was armor. I remember sometimes even like laying in my bed and feeling like emotionally, like being ripped open. And like the anger was leaving, but it hurt to let it go. And so much of my identity of who I was that anger. So letting go of that anger to me was like, I don't even exist anymore. Because this has been the thing fueling my life. This has been the thing getting me up in the morning. This has been the thing sending me to class, to work, to my next shift, like just hustling to survive in New York. It was all just this anger to prove people wrong, to try to have a better life than what I grew up with, to try to prove to people that I did have something to offer, that I was talented, that I was seen. I think it all came back to that I'd felt so unseen. So once I let go of the anger, there was nothing left. Like I felt like, well, that's it. I don't exist. I've died. And now just whatever's left is just whatever, God wants me to do, I'll just do. And again, all these verses from the Bible that I'd heard over the years, like you have to lose your life to find it. You have to lay down your life to follow Jesus. Now it all started to click and make sense to me. And so that was it. I was just like, okay, there's nothing left. But God, whatever you want me to do, however I can serve you is great, because whoever I was, that person doesn't exist anymore. And so I got back together with David, who I realized had been a really, really important person that God had put in my life intentionally. And so we got back together, and he was going into ministry, and he was going to move from New York to Chicago. And so he was like, well, are you going to come with me or not? You know, it was kind of like, it was on me to decide. And I did not want to be, in ministry again, because I felt like it's like you're setting this high bar and you're just going to be a hypocrite, because that was my fear. But I felt like, okay, well, you know what? I'm dead. I'm just here now. Whatever's left is just to serve God. And, David's moving to Chicago, and I don't know anybody in Chicago. So we'll get married and I'll go with him, and whatever he needs help with, I'll just help him. And so I spent the next 5 years of my life just like driving around a minivan that said Juice for Jesus on the side, like picking up kids to bring them to youth events, or which, by the way, I didn't even know how to drive. Like, I grew up in New York City. I didn't know how to drive. I didn't know how to cook. And I'm like now cooking for like ministry events. Like, I didn't know how to do any of these things. But again, God sent me to school. God sent me to his school to learn how to serve, how to just serve out of nothing, out of you have nothing to give, but you're just showing up because God sent you, and you're just there to be used by him, whatever that looks like. And I just said to God, hey, whatever you want to do, well, let's do it. But I did have this prayer sort of in the back of my heart, like, Lord, maybe one day there'll be something I can do where I can use my passions and my gifts and my theater training and my playwriting and my love for teamwork and bringing people together and storytelling. And, God, one day maybe there'll be some place where I'll be able to serve you with that. So years went by, and I kept praying that prayer, and I felt like I gave my life away to Jesus, and he gave it back. Because over the years, then he did open those doors, not right away, but I did then get chances to be part of the communications department in Juice for Jesus and get to use my creative writing background. And I was trained in media with Juice for Jesus. And little by little, I started to learn and get involved in all sorts of things that gave me so much joy. Like, what I love, this is what I love, team storytelling. And I got to be part of teams telling the story of who Jesus is, of why he came into the world, why he came to the Jewish people, to our people, and what that means, why that's significant, not just for us as Jewish people, but it's significant because it's part of his plan to reach everyone. And so I just was filled with so much joy to be able to do these things. And God just over the years was so faithful and just opened one door after another for me to be able to serve him. He has restored every single thing that I lost. I lost this experience of a sweet childhood as a girl, and God gave me an incredible daughter who now I get to side by side with her. We get to go through her amazing childhood, and he gave me restored relationships with my mom, even my father. Even though we never really were close again, God gave me the chance to be with him when he passed away and to sing to him, sing over him that song. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because you are with me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. I got to sit with him and sing that over him while he took his last breath. God provided me with an incredible husband who has pushed me to grow spiritually, has pushed me to heal so much from my past, and has given me another family with his family to come around me with love in that way that I didn't have that extended family growing up. I now have that because I have his family. that has surrounded us with so much love. And it took many years. It wasn't like I gave my life to Jesus and the next day everything was restored. But every step of the way, God brought every single thing I'd experienced in my life and my past, He gave it new meaning. And I've been able to share my story with other people who have told me, people have told me that they've heard my story or seen my story, and it was part of them coming to faith. And every single thing in my life, like years and years of waitressing, you know how much I use all those things I learned waitressing in my job that I do now of running international and North American operations for Juice for Jesus, for a large ministry. God did not waste a single moment of my life. Every single thing, even though it was not what He would have ever wanted, it was not the way things are meant to be, He'd used it for good. And so I lived that. I'm living that every day. And I know if you're watching this, that He can do that in your life. Everything that you've been through, every painful experience, every single thing that you should have had, the support, the love, the protection that you should have had that you didn't have, that was wrong. But God, that is what He does. He takes things that are broken and He makes them whole. And He can take every single broken thing in your life and thing in your past and use it for good beyond what you could even dream of. That's what I've lived. And that is my hope and prayer for every single person that gets to hear my story.
I have to wipe my tears. Yeah, I really want to ask you, Arielle, if there's someone watching right now that feels validated to be angry, which, which is so understandable. But at the same time, I know that there may be someone watching that just cannot get out of the cycles of anger. And what happened to you with the way you were describing it, that is a miracle in and of itself, that the Lord is the one that took away your anger like that. But sometimes it is a journey, and so I guess my question is what would you say to someone watching that just feels like, I want to be angry, I deserve to be angry. You don't know what it was like, or whatever it may be. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned in your testimony that you would like to offer to someone watching that may be thinking that right now?
I had someone in my life in those years where I was searching and wrestling with a lot of these things when I was in college, who was sort of the opposite of like what I was saying with my husband, where he was this like really good influence on me. I actually had somebody who was sort of like on my other shoulder saying things like, you could be so successful and what's holding you back is your faith. Like you need to just let go. Because I still had this like, I wasn't quite ready to fully let go and just, so to speak, do whatever I wanted. I had this, I was holding myself back because I had been exposed to things of faith, right? And I remember hearing things like that, like you need to let go of your ideas about, being Jewish or being Christian or asking questions about faith. That's all holding you back from your potential. And I remember this person also telling me, if you don't pursue your dreams, and your dream is to be a famous theater artist, director, and playwright, which, by the way, that was never my dream. I didn't really have a dream. I just started getting involved in that, having fun. And there was reasons that I loved the theater world, but people gave me that dream. People around me told me, "Oh, you're gonna be one day, a famous artist. You have so much potential." And of course, you believe what people say about you, right? So I remember this person saying to me, if you don't follow your dream of being a great artist, then that dream will die inside you and it will poison you. And you'll be resentful and you'll be bitter and dead inside. For some reason, I never forgot those words. And over the years, I've thought about them. And I've realized a couple things. One thing I've realized is actually he was right. Because if your dream is just to make a name for yourself and it's not about serving others, and you hold on too tight to that dream and you're just living for yourself, yeah, that will poison you inside. But I've also realized that anger works the same way. If you keep that anger inside, it will decay inside you. And so I realized at a certain point that all my anger was valid. It wasn't that it wasn't valid. And I think that's part of why it was so hard to let go, because you're like, I just want somebody to see me and say, I deserve to be this mad. I was treated so wrong. And I had to let go and say, you know what? I might never get from people who hurt me in my life. I might never hear the words I want to hear. Like, I might never receive the apology that I feel that I deserve to hear. But at the end of the day, this anger is killing me. And so if it can be valid, but I have to let it go. I have to give it to God. I have to lay it at his feet. I can't keep it as who I am because it's going to kill me. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they feel like their pain is valid, and it is valid. But Jesus took our pain, our sorrows. He felt them. He bore them on the cross. He felt every single ounce of pain that we feel. Him laying down his life and dying for us was him saying, your pain is valid. It is real, but I want to carry it for you. And so I think that anybody who can relate to my journey, I think I want to encourage them to say, everything you've experienced, it was wrong. Give it to Jesus. Not because it's easy to let it go, but because you need to be free. You deserve to be free. You should not have to live anymore in the bondage, in the captivity of things that you didn't deserve to happen to you. Give it away for your freedom. That's what I would say.
You mentioned something that I wrote down because you kept repeating it. And so that for me was like a moment where I was like, I think the Lord is highlighting this as well. You kept saying that part of what kept you away from living a life of faith was that it looked too hard, or that it meant that in some way, shape, or form, you may be a hypocrite. And so for that person that is watching right now that may think that exact thing right now, where they are curious, or they have even these moments where they feel conviction, but the idea of going all in, too much, it's too difficult. What would you say to that person, as someone that now you've been living for Jesus all in for a number of years, and I'm sure you don't think that anymore, that it is something that requires you to be a hypocrite. So yeah, I just wanted to ask that if there's anything that you want to say to that, as as someone that once felt that way and you no longer do.
Okay. Yeah. I want to say two things. One thing is that I had a very specific conversation that I remember with David, with my husband, when we were getting back together, but I was still coming out of this lifestyle of a lot of things that I wanted to walk away from. But again, it wasn't overnight. It was a process, one by one, of walking away from things I've been involved in that I was saying to God, I'm done, I'm all in on you. And I remember really struggling to let some of those things go. And I remember David telling me, you are so much stronger than you think you are. And he was right. I didn't believe, really, that I had the strength to push on, to do the right thing, to walk away from things that were hard for me to let go of. And I was stronger than I knew, and I also had God's strength with me. And so I think I actually believed that I wasn't strong enough, that I was too weak, that I was always going to fall back into those things, into those temptations, into those patterns of behavior. So one thing was just I stopped believing that lie. That's a lie. Those are the lies Satan tells us. I was strong. And with Jesus, I was even stronger. And so that's one thing I would say. And another thing I'll say is that God still stirs up things in me from my past, or even from the present, of things that I struggle with, or sin that's in my life, or something he's convicted me of, or pain around something from the past. But what I've come to, I think, understand is that when those things are being stirred up, that's because God wants to bring more healing. He wants to bring me deeper in with him. He wants to heal my heart again. And so I've stopped trying to look at those things as bad things, of like, I'm struggling, I've fallen into temptation, I'm not where I should be, I'm a hypocrite. Those are lies that we tell ourselves. And the truth is that God is working through every single situation in our life to bring us closer to him, to know us more deeply and more intimately. I learned a few lessons from giving birth unmedicated a few times. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. I feel like it's very not G-rated. I don't know, for some reason. But I realized giving birth a few times that the pain is to bring new life. And you can either tell yourself, I'm afraid of this pain and I'm scared, and hold on and like clench tight. You're just making it worse. You're making it take longer. And if you let go and you say, this is pain, but God is going to use this pain to bring new life, new creation, then he can work. Then he can bring you through it in a way where you're empowered. You might be in pain, but pain is not bad. And that's another lie, that anything that's hard is bad, that anything that's pain is bad. Struggling, temptation, pain, these are things that God wants to use to glorify him, so he can show his power in your life, so you can be an encouragement to other people. And so that's, I think, been one of the biggest changes in my life in the last few years, as I've gone deeper in my relationship with the Lord, to reject the lie that that pain is bad, and to instead say, this is a sign that God is at work, and lean in.
You just described what it means to truly be discipled by Jesus. Mm-hmm. I love that. Could you pray for those that are watching your testimony right now and are identifying with parts of your story, and maybe they're even recognizing that they are still under a level of trauma mentally? I can imagine, even as you were sharing your story, of just even the work of the Lord over your mind, over your memories. And so I just say that out to say, if you could just pray for those people that are in pain, but they want to give their pain to Jesus, or they're in that place where they are willing to try to give their pain to Jesus and see what that will be like. Could you pray for those people?
Oh, Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much that you came into this world to set captives free. And a captive is someone who was taken. It wasn't their fault. They were taken against their will somewhere that they were never meant to go. But you came to set us free. And Lord, that's my prayer for anyone who's watching this who's experienced trauma. It's not their fault. Their pain is real. Just like captivity, they were taken by evil, and it should have never happened. But they don't have to live anymore in that captivity. Jesus has paid the price to set us free. He's opened the doors. Lord, I just pray that you would set so many people free in this generation, Lord Jesus. There's so many people. There's just so many people who are in so much pain, whether it's through things they've experienced growing up, ways they've been wronged, things that are happening in the world, the way that we just can't trust. We can't trust what people say and what's right and what's wrong. And there's so much misinformation. And Lord, would you just bring about a move, an incredible move of truth and healing in our time. And Lord, I pray for people watching this now, that they would experience your truth that would set them free. Amen.
Amen. Arielle, who is Jesus to you?
Jesus is the love of my life. He's been with me in every single moment of my life. He's seen me. He's never left me. And he's loved me unconditionally. And my job is just to receive that love, which sounds easy, but it's actually hard. And I have to tell him every day again, Lord, I receive your love today. Help me to live my life as a person in the world who's unconditionally loved and protected, because that's the truth.
Do you have any words that you would like to share for any Jewish person that may come across your video? They may be watching this right now and they don't follow Jesus.
You know, in our Hebrew scriptures, in the book of Isaiah, it talks about the servant of the Lord, and it says, by his stripes, by his wounds, we are healed. And a lot of people interpret that in different ways. You know, there's a lot of Jewish teachings where people say that's about Israel and Israel's suffering. But I don't know anybody who's been healed by the suffering of our people. I've never heard of that. I think there's so much beauty in Judaism. I love Judaism. I go to a synagogue and I go through the Siddur and the liturgy, and to me, that's home. That's my people. That's our way that we express our love for God and our culture. But I don't know a single person that would say that Judaism healed them. And I know a lot of people from every ethnicity, from every religious background, Jewish background, Muslim background, from every country that speak every language on earth, that would say that Jesus healed them. And they still continue on in their culture. They don't change culture, but they're spiritually healed by the Jewish Messiah. And I believe that that's what the prophets were foretelling in Isaiah 53. By his wounds, we are healed, that there would be a Messiah for our people that would come and lay down his life for the healing of the world. That's in our scriptures. And if you can find another person who laid down their life for the healing of the world, I'd love to hear about it. But billions of people have found that hope in Jesus. And so, whatever you believe, it's worth checking it out. It's worth reading his teachings. It's worth looking at the prophecies that point to the Messiah. It's worth asking God to reveal the truth to you. The journey to find truth is going to be worth it when you find it. Whatever it is that you're scared of losing, tell that to God. That's what confession is. Confession is just telling the truth, right? It's like if somebody gets arrested and for a crime and they say confess, that's all that means. Just tell the truth about what really is going on. Just tell God the truth. Just tell him what you're afraid of. He can handle the truth. He's the author of truth. And then wait. Tell him the truth and then wait to see how he will answer and how he will reveal himself to you. And I believe that he will.
Do you have any last words for those that are watching your testimony right now?
I really struggled throughout my life, like a lot of people, feeling like I was different. Like, how come I couldn't just be like everybody else? How come I couldn't be normal? How come I was the way I was? How come I couldn't change something about myself I wanted to change? But that's why I fell in love with Jesus. Because he knows us, he sees us, and he has named us. A one-of-a-kind creation of his. A gift to the world. And when I started to live who I am on the foundation of who Jesus is and the love that he has for me, then who I am is a gift to the world. And who you are is a gift to the world. And it doesn't matter if you're not like everybody else. It doesn't matter if there's things about yourself that you wish were different. It doesn't matter, because God is going to make something beautiful out of your life, because you wouldn't be here if that wasn't his plan. And so if you feel like you're not normal, you feel like you've been through too much, you feel like you'll never be whole. I've had moments, I've had dark moments where I felt like I'll never feel better. It's a lie. You will. And God will and can and wants to turn your life into something incredible. And that's what he's done in my life.